Hello and welcome back to 50 Years of Spartans and Beyond. I'm your host, John Schwartz, and today we're going to be taking a look back at the the women's cross-country team's 2006 UAA championship, the first in the team's history. Prior to the 2006 season, the Spartans had never finished better than fourth in the conference, but the win began a stretch of 5 straight top 3 finishes in the conference meet. Here to join us today to discuss it are Esther, who is a junior on that team and placed second at the meet, Stephanie Nothelle, who is a senior on the team and placed fourth at the UAA championships, and Head Coach Kathy Lanese. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thanks
for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Stephanie, we'll start with you. And if you don't mind telling us a little bit about what brought you to Case Western Reserve, and when you came here, did you plan on competing in cross country?
Yeah, so I'm originally from the Midwest and wanted to stay in the Midwest for my my college years, I guess. I was from the Chicago area, so Cleveland was just far enough from my parents to make it feel like I was going away, but not getting too far from them. And I ran cross country and track in high school. Some of my really wonderful high school teammates went on to Division I spots, but that wasn't quite how I wanted to experience cross country as a collegiate athlete. And I remember when I came to visit campus, I learned about the cross country and track teams, and I really liked the camaraderie, and so I thought that it would be a great thing for me. And actually, when I came during orientation and move-in weekend, I immediately made 2 of my best friends who were college teammates. Karen and Anna, who I still text with every single day. So yeah, I think the cross country team was a big part of what attracted me to Case, and certainly is like the biggest part of my memory of my college years.
Esther, I'll turn to you and ask you the same question. You have a little bit of an interesting answer, I think, to that. The rumor is that Coach Lanese found you on a treadmill in the Veal Center. Is that actually how you were discovered?
So I can't remember really if it was a treadmill or an elliptical. But I think, yes, the story that's been told over and over is that I was found on a treadmill. So the reason why I came to Case, I'm from Richmond, Virginia, and I've lived in the South most of my life now. But I visited schools during the summer of after my sophomore year of high school. Because I was going abroad for my junior year, so I knew that I wasn't really going to have time on the back end to visit schools. But the key being that I visited Cleveland in the summer, and it was beautiful and amazing, and I figured I could go to school there. And the reason why Case was my number 1 school is because I really wanted to study early music performance, and I ended up having lunch. The only person in the music building was Ross Duffin, and he was the head of that program at Case. And he ended up being my advisor for my 4 years there, and he was amazing. But the real reason why I came to Case was because I had gotten a music scholarship. I also happened to start running in the winter of my senior year of high school. I didn't really plan on competing in college because being a collegiate athlete seemed like way beyond my league. And I ended up, I think I checked a box when I received some kind of thing in the mail about what types of activities you'd like to do. And I said, maybe cross country, and never heard anything from anybody, and showed up to campus. I'd never run cross country before because I just did indoor and outdoor. And I've always been kind of a gym rat. So I went to check out Veal, and Kathy was looking out her window and she saw me running in, and went ahead and found me in the cardio room and told me to go get a physical. And then the rest of the story is history.
Very, very cool. Kathy, do you remember seeing both Stephanie and Esther for the first time? And did you realize that you had 2 pretty special athletes there?
Yeah, I mean, I knew Stephanie's history, which was, definitely key. And Stephanie was really a fun person to coach, because I always knew she was competition strong, but in practice she kind of just came and did her thing and left, and there wasn't a whole lot else because she had an agenda. And so I think as she matured and, we became more team oriented, and when we realized we had the talent amongst us as a group, that's when she really started to shine. So, yeah.
Well, and talk a little bit too, Kathy, because you mentioned, as the team became more talented as it grew, when did you realize that you had something special with that 2016? Did it occur during the season? Was it heading into the season that you felt that, hey, maybe this is a team that could really compete at a high level on both the conference level, and by virtue of competing at a high level on the conference level, you're going to compete nationally as well? When did you realize that was going to be the case for this team?
Right. Yeah, I always remember having this discussion in the fall with Coach Rubin at that time, and I always say, "Oh, I don't know if I have the team that's going to make it to nationals." And I think I said that for like all the 5 years we made it in a row, just kind of worrying at the beginning. So I think the magic is like watching the team come together, watching the team gel. And it was after I seriously remember this conversation. It was after the UAA championships when we won. Was Karen, who isn't on this call, but Karen Wheeler at the time, had said to me, "Coach, I think we're really good." And then the WashU coach came up to me after UAA and had said, you guys could be on the podium this year. You know that." And I didn't even know what the podium was. This was our first nationals. I had no idea what the podium meant, which was the top 4 teams in the country. And, to me, that was a long reach, but, and, then we won the region that year. We were undefeated that year, which is, I think a lot of people don't know, is we never lost a meet in the Division III realm. We just dominated through the region, beat Calvin College, which, they've always been the powerhouse prowess of female running. And we beat them, I think it was 3 points. I went back to look. I can't even find the stats on it, but I think it was 3 points. So it was within a couple points at the UAA and a couple points at the region. And it was then, where the national highlight, just came forth. We just moved forward into the national meet, and that was a whole nother story we can get into.
Yes.
So I have a slightly different story.
Go for it.
From my perspective, I remember the previous fall at regionals, we had missed out on going to nationals by 5 points. And I think at that point, it was clear to me, who I was a sophomore, I'd just qualified individually for the first time. And the rest of the team was mostly freshmen. And then knowing that Stephanie was in Germany and she'd be coming back and she had previously been our best runner, I knew in that moment, I was like, we are going to go to nationals next year. Like, no doubt in my mind. And I was driven by that thought for the next, 12 months. So, and I know that all the rest of the freshmen really were too. I just remember celebrating so much because I think my freshman year, the team, I wasn't even on it. I didn't even make the top 7. My freshman year, I think we were like 11th or 12th in the region. And that was like not a bad showing for us. And then the following year we were 5th and we missed by just 5 points. And so that was when I was like, okay, these are just freshmen. They're basically making up all of our top 5. And we're going to definitely be there next year once Stephanie comes back, and we've got Karen in good shape. And so I knew from that moment that like, that was my mission.
Stephanie, did you have a moment where you said to yourself, hey, this could be, a big time year for us, or I know that we can compete at the national level? Was there a moment of that clicking for you?
Yeah, I think similar to Coach, it didn't click for me until later on in the season. I remember UAA's finishing 4th and thinking, I'd never seen so few people ahead of me. Like, where is everybody? And same thing with regionals. I was like, how is this happening? How am I passing people? Like, what is going on? As Coach said, I loved cross country, and I'm lucky that I guess I have some talent somewhere, but I was always very academically focused. And so I think I kind of surprised myself.
Not just
and
yourself.
yeah, everybody.
all
But we had such a great and fun team that year. It just made it fun to compete and not as stressful. So
You guys have all spoken about the team and the, being a great team. And I remember working, and this is a couple of years later, the 2008 meet, which I don't believe, I think both of you had already graduated by then, but Kathy, you'll remember it. I remember that team having this big personality to it. I think they came to the award stand all dressed in hats and I think dressed as wizards.
So,
or something like
right. So
that.
John, you were in Atlanta, and
Correct.
he was assistant sports information there,
Correct.
and we were in Atlanta that year, and that is the year Brita shined, very strongly. But yeah, we had a cat in the hat. It was always Coach Barnes's. At the end of every year, we get into championship season, he would bring in something quirky for us to wear or display, and it was just like Stephanie said, just really fun. And I think the women fed off of that much bigger than the men's team, and it kept us really relaxed.
Do any of you remember the personality of the team? Was it kind of a quirky team? Was it a fun team? Was it a serious team? How do you all envision the personality of how that team was in 2006?
I would say, obviously everybody remembers the fun parts. And Britta and Kristen were kind of the spearheads, I feel like, along with Lauren, of really keeping things goofy. And I think that was really good for me because it helped me take a little bit of the edge off. And I was able to dig into the goofy side a lot more than I had probably before. Well, I don't really remember much before they came along. But honestly, I'd say that freshman class, so they were all the class that you saw in 2008. They were the graduating class that year. And when that class came in, that was just a huge change for the program, I feel like, because they had each other. They were a huge class. She's showing the people, but you've got Britta behind your head now. But yeah, and Hillary was part of that too, honestly. They just had such a great group that really just loved each other and were really, while they were very goofy and fun loving, they were also intensely competitive, just under the surface. And I think that combination was pretty lethal for us as a team.
Kathy, and let's turn our attention towards that meet on, the 2006 meet, the UA championships. Kathy, obviously, and again, it still holds true today that the UA is always one of the most competitive conferences in the country. A lot of times the national championship comes out of the UAA, the national championship team. And more often than not, it's at least one of the top, 4 or 5 teams in the country. Kathy, going into that UAA championship meet, did you think the team could win? Did you think you would win? Sometimes you could put the points together and the times together in your head. What were your thoughts going into that meet as your team's chances of winning the UAA championship?
Well, we kind of had something in our favor. So the night before was the UAA championship. I was in the golf course across from Washington University, and Coach Stiles came up to me, and it was, we both came in the same year. So we were, had a few years of coaching behind us. That was my 5th year and his 5th year. But I think her name was Beth. You guys can maybe correct me. Herndon. Yes.
Herndon,
so,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Beth was injured, and they were going to save her for the national meet. And she had some kind of nagging injury going on. So she actually did not run the UAA championships that year. And so when he told me that she was not competing at the UAA, I thought, this is our sure bet to win. And I don't know if you guys remember that, but I remember that clearly. And so from that point, John, it was something to take advantage of, and we were able to capitalize off of that.
So actually, I'm looking at it now here, Kathy. I think she actually won. Beth Herndon won that meet that year.
She did. So that's why I was like, I don't think that's true. Yeah, no, she definitely beat me that day. Yeah.
Maybe she was.
It was somebody else. I think it might have been Tyler or somebody else. Maybe Kate, one of their top 5, I do believe, didn't get to run. I think it might have been Tyler.
So that was in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm incorrect on that. So
yeah.
At any rate, one of their top runners was not running, and it ended up, we were able to capitalize off that, and I knew who we had to pass in order, and it was Karen. Karen she had a big meet that day, a really big meet that day, and that she was the savior for us that day.
Stephanie also had a really big meet that day because I mean, I had not seen Stephanie in a race since my freshman year, because she'd always been behind me. And I remember that day was the first day of the season. And then it was UAA's regionals and nationals that she came up on me and pushed me to work harder. And, if it weren't for her by nationals, there's no way I would have been All-American that day, because she just showed up and I couldn't just let her go like I'd let everybody else go in my pity party.
Yes.
So I mean,
strong.
Yeah, Stephanie had an incredible end of the season, but I also I wasn't that shocked because I'd seen the same thing freshman year when she had previously competed, because she was out her junior year. That was her sophomore year. That she basically was just kind of like hanging out for the first half of the season, but then by UAA's, she was our top runner, and she was going to be our most consistent runner just in the postseason.
Well, and we'll get into the actual course in a sec, because I want to ask you some questions about the course and the weather that day, just to, get your thoughts on that. But the UA championship meet was hosted by WashU, and I have to imagine that going into that meet, WashU was probably the favorite going into it, or at least certainly the team to beat.
Yeah.
Was there any added motivation coming into that? Was there any thought? Was there any discussion that, hey, you know what? Maybe we have a chance to kind of rain on their parade a little bit and beat WashU on their home course?
I didn't think we could do it. I definitely didn't have that as my plan. But honestly, I'd say I remember we brought assassins outfits. That was our whatever costume of choice as a team, and we did not. I actually felt guilty afterwards, because I was like, I didn't think we were gonna win, and then go wear assassins outfits, because it just felt a little bit distasteful. I thought we were gonna be third or something, which would still be awesome. But no, I felt like as a team we had discussed top 3, and that was a very achievable goal. So we were just being our goofy selves, and we ended up winning. It just happened.
Okay, so if you can, and Stephanie, maybe you remember this too. So that day at the meet, do you remember the course, what the course looked like, and do you remember the weather at the meet that day?
I remember the course. It's at Forest Park. I think that's what it's called. And I knew that course. I happened to, I spent some time in St. Louis because I had a significant other who was at WashU in college. And so I was familiar with running there. The weather, I want to say, was raining and kind of gross.
Kathy, I see you nodding your head there.
I do. Go ahead, Steph.
Well, the only weather that I really remember is from nationals, and that wasn't so much the weather that day as what the weather had done to our course that day. But on UAA, I'm drawing a blank. Was it also super muddy?
It was pretty muddy, and there were not terribly muddy, but there were some low points in the course because it was a criterium. It was the first criterium course we had run, so it was 2K loops. So we had to do 3K loops, and that was early. That might have been the first year we ran 6K. I don't know.
No, we ran it before. It was the third year that we ran 6K.
So third year. Thank you. So my memory is wrong on that, but it was kind of a loop, a 2K loop, and it was at Forest Park, but there were some hilly regions, and in the low parts, it got pretty muddy. And it was actually raining. I think it was the night before that it rained. Was it raining?
Yeah, I think it was sunny that day. It was actually sunny that day for the race itself, but the course was. I do remember very vividly, is one of my favorite stories about like parallel conversations between coach and athlete when there's like a lot of anxiety in the air. It was right before the race had started. I'd already warmed up, and coach comes up to me and she says, "Esther, the start has changed." And I said, "Okay, what time will it be?" And she said, "No, the start has changed." And I said, "Okay, coach, what time will it be?" And she was like, "The course has changed." I was like, "Okay, thank you for changing your words." So like they had to change the starting course, the very starting like funnel. The funnel into the course had changed because there was like a lot of mud like right on that top surface was really flat, so it obviously hadn't like run off of the area. But it's so funny because now as a coach, like especially in really high stakes situations where somebody's like the athlete's nervous, the coach is nervous, you just cannot communicate clearly. It was a really good lesson, and it was pretty funny.
So Esther, I'll stay with you here, and you talk a little bit about kind of coming into that race and changing the start, and obviously coach was trying to communicate that to you. I would imagine that also kind of implies that you, first of all, you had some goals there, and I imagine at that point in your career, your goal was to, if not win, then to be in the top group, which you certainly were. But do you remember your goals coming into the race, and then what your plan was coming into that race, how you wanted to run it that day?
So I had been, I think, every single race that year, except maybe the first one, I had been second place in the race. And my goal so after freshman year, which was pretty bad, my goal going into sophomore year, I improved a lot during that entire year. I took 3 minutes off my 5K from the fall to the spring. And by the spring, that my goal for sophomore year had been like top 10 for every single race. My goal for junior year was top 3 for every single race. And I achieved both of those up until nationals. And then, so I was second place in almost every single race junior year. And going into nationals or into UAAs, obviously it was also top 3. I had been third the previous year. So I knew Beth was very good. And she generally ran away with things. So I was just there to be in the top pack and see how many people I could pick off.
Stephanie, how about you? Did you have a plan? Did you have a predicted finish? Do you remember anything going into that race about where you wanted to be by the end of it?
I wanted to finish and not disappoint my team. But I have to admit that I didn't really have that set of a goal the way that Esther did. I think part of it was that I just didn't think of myself that way. And I didn't know that I was going to peak at the end of the season the way that I did. I probably wanted to be in the top 20 maybe. But I'm someone who can be pretty hard on myself. So I could imagine that I probably didn't want to set a goal that I couldn't get, because then that would be even more disappointing. So I don't have a great answer to that the way that Esther does.
I think part of what makes this kind of cool is that we have two really successful runners here who have two different approaches to the way they attack this meet. And I think that's really interesting to hear how really both of you coming in were both super successful in it, but had different approaches. So not having an answer, I think, kind of tells us a lot about how you approach the sport in that sense and how you approach that meet. That being said, so what I'm going to ask you, and I know this is now going on 15 years ago, but as much as you can, take us through memories you have of that race or what you remember from the race, at least up until the point you crossed the finish line. We'll talk a little bit about the after and when you guys realized that as a team you had won, but Esther, if you could start, take us through that race as best you can remember. Anything you do about that race itself.
Honestly, it's funny, as you were asking that, I realized that like the memories I have are mostly of sophomore UAAs and senior UAAs. I don't have a whole lot of memory of that race. It's probably a good thing. I think I just like, it sometimes is best when you just don't overthink it and get in the zone and just race. I do remember chasing down Beth for most of the race. Like, she was definitely ahead of me the entire time. And I just remember being there, and then obviously having Stephanie come up on me and realizing how close she was, which I knew was a great thing. And then also not wanting her to beat me, like, we should both be very high up as possible, but, that was the theme for, I'd say, our entire season that year, was like this very strong, like, inter-squad competition, and also camaraderie of like, that Stephanie, I think, was back and forth with Kristen most of the first part of the year. And Karen was back and forth with Britta. And it was like these two freshmen, or now sophomores, against two seniors, but the two seniors had missed their junior year. So it was like kind of bringing everybody, that pairing was just so helpful for the team. Obviously they wanted to beat each other, but that, in the end, if they both ran faster in each set, then everybody wins, and that ended up really working out for us. And I was lucky that by the end of the season, Stephanie came through and she ended up being my partner instead, kind of.
Stephanie, how about you? Do you remember anything from that race? You could tell me how the flowers smelled that day at the park. But anything from that race that you remember, or any memories that stick out in your mind?
I mean, the only thing I remember from the end of the season that year was, and maybe this was a UAA memory, or maybe I'm mixing up meets, but just being surprised that like I could see Esther, like, and thinking that like, oh, what's going on? Like, at first I really did not understand, like, how,
like, is Esther having a bad day?
I assumed that everyone else was having a terrible day. So I think that was the biggest shock. I do, now that Coach mentioned it, remember that it was loops, because I remember thinking, wow, I'm not someone who starts out in races very fast. I tend to like start out slower and then pick people off. That's just like my way. So I just remember towards the end thinking like, I'm passing more people than I usually do. This is really interesting. Oh, look, there's Esther. Oh, wow, there's Esther. What's going on?
Kathy, I'm going to ask you this, and I've seen you during cross-country races, and if the race is a 6K, you probably run a 12K over the course of a cross-country meet going back and forth. What do you remember from that meet?
I don't know if that's quite accurate, but I think I do expend a lot of energy. I just knew... what I remember is like going into that last K was make or break. I mean, the last 2K. So that last loop, that I don't remember if we were behind or ahead at that point, but I knew that it was dangerously close. And I remember expending a lot of energy hanging out near this tree on this hill region, and just using every ounce of energy in my voice and my actions, any motivational thing I could bring up to get everyone to the finish line as quickly as possible. And it was, as Esther kind of said, I didn't expect a win, and happened. I don't think I understood the magnitude of it until I actually got home.
Kathy, I'm going to stay with you on this too. And you said you didn't expect to win, but obviously one came eventually. Do you remember the moment that you realized, and I don't know, again, if you were writing down places or adding numbers, do you remember the moment you realized that we won this thing, this is ours, we claim the UAA championship?
I remember someone had reported the score to me, and I said, I don't believe it. I'm not going to believe it until I see it, the official results. I said, because somebody could make a mistake. And honestly, it was kind of this calming moment for me. It was, yes, a point of celebration, but like, I don't think I really celebrated till I got home. I think it was just such a shock, such a surprise that we had come from, I mean, 7th when I came in the conference, and in just a few short years, we were champs. And so it was kind of a surreal moment for me. It had to sink in.
Esther, how about you? Do you remember when you realized that you guys won as a team?
Yeah, I was going to agree that because the success, it's kind of lucky that the success came so fast, that we went from, I guess, my freshman year, we were probably 7th or 8th or something. That was generally where we'd finished, and maybe even like 6th or 7th the year before we won. So it wasn't like we were knocking on the door of, in the top 3 consistently for a few years first. It was just like, no, look, we have the team. Let's just run our best and see what happens. And I feel like, I remember we were on some grassy, only because of the pictures that we have, that we were on some grassy hill, and we had like a pretty nice camp in the sun, and we'd already changed into our costumes, I think, before we actually found out that we'd won. And that's why it was like pretty awkward, because we had like super soakers and like masks on and stuff, and then we found out that we'd won. We're like, maybe this is poor taste, but hey, you know what, it's not like, it was such an overthrow and shock that like we couldn't have really planned on looking like jerks, like it was just shock.
Stephanie, do you remember the celebration afterwards?
Yeah.
I only remember things from pictures, like Esther said. So I remember, was it around Halloween, or were we just wearing costumes?
Always around Halloween.
Around Halloween.
Yeah.
And I think you were actually one of the people who was like, no, I don't think we should be wearing this.
Probably. That sounds like me.
You're much more modest than I was, for sure.
Kathy, if you could share what that meant to the program going forward, because again, it started a stretch for you guys where you were top 3 for the next 5 years. You won the championship again 2 years later. Getting that win, getting that confidence, how did it propel you forward for nationals that year, for regionals, and then how did it propel you forward, really for the next couple of years?
Yeah. So as I said, FAA was, Karen, boy, coach, we're really good. And then I had realized, wow, we really have a chance to win this region. And understanding that's really big too. And I guess I couldn't comprehend what it meant at that point. And so I just kind of went with it, I went with the fun team that I had. I didn't change anything with the climate of the program. And I think in the following years, we realized that even though we worked extremely hard, that the fun component was our weapon. And I go back to like, I'll say like when we went to Atlanta that year and we had won the UAA for the second time, I remember John Curtin coming up to me and he goes, man, your team just has so much fun. And he said, it's so awesome watching you guys compete. It's so awesome watching you guys celebrate. And that's when I realized, like, this is okay to have this type of climate. But I think as the years continued, we just brought in different people that actually changed the way we were doing things. So you can't always create that. It kind of develops with the actual individuals and characters that you have on the team.
For sure. Before we go, I want to ask both Stephanie and Esther, I want to ask you both what you're doing. Stephanie, where are you at? What's your life been since you left Case Western Reserve, and what are you doing now?
Like I said, I was always very academically focused, big science nerd. So I was pre-med at Case, and I went to medical school and residency, and so now I'm a physician. I live in Baltimore. I'm currently like 7 months pregnant, so I'm not running. I can barely walk without waddling. Um, I sometimes think about how Coach told us that she would do like interval workouts on the track when she was pregnant with one of her kids. And I just think like, I have no idea how you did that, woman. Oh my gosh. Yeah, so I am a doctor and a mom, and my very best friends, like I said earlier, are my my college cross country teammates. So,
Esther, how about you? What have you been up to since graduation?
So I ended up spending 2 years in Vienna, right out of school as a Fulbright teaching assistant. And it was there that I like realized that I could potentially qualify for the Olympic trials in the marathon. So I started training with a coach for the first time during my second year there once the window had opened. Ended up running 2:39 while I was living abroad. And then that qualified me for a couple different elite training groups. I ended up choosing to go to Zap Fitness for 3 years in kind of Blowing Rock, Appalachia, North Carolina. I spent 3 years there, and then decided that I needed to be able to choose my own friends. So I moved to New Jersey and got a job as a college coach at Rider University. And then basically since then, that was where everything kind of culminated for my running career. I ended up winning a U.S. championship and representing the United States at the World Championships in the marathon in 2015. And so I, had some great opportunities to compete at world majors and international marathons. And at this point, I've been injured for a couple of years now. Just kind of getting my way back. I actually just had my second PRP injection this morning. Very fun, but no, I'm hopeful that I'll be able to continue to train. And at this point, I've been coaching now for like 7-8 years. I am primarily a private online coach, but I also coach at Clemson University and have coached at Rider, App State, and now Clemson. And yeah, I have a dog and I live in Greenville, South Carolina, and a husband that I met who at one of the at the training group that I joined, Zap. And I, living my best life.
Well, Stephanie, Kathy, Esther, thank you all so much for joining us today. It's again just really interesting to hear all these stories about, again, a moment that really stands in school history as one of the great moments certainly in the history of the program. Thank you all again for joining us.
Oh, thank you, John.
Thank you so much. Thank you.